I'm Donna Whyte, and I am your host for Witness to History. For any of you who are new as our audience and our guest this evening, welcome to you. Witness to History is an opportunity the second Sunday of each month at 6 o'clock for us to learn more about our Moreland and more broadly defined Shaker residents who are involved in the Moreland Network. We all know we have wonderful stories, and this is the opportunity for us to share our personal stories with others. Ordinarily, we will take about 30 minutes. I will take about 30 minutes to have a conversation with our guest. As we will probably proceed this evening, I'm probably just going to ask George a few questions and then he'll take over. George Eaton, he is our esteemed guest this evening. Hello, George.
Hello, thank
And
you.
so welcome to your friends who have joined us this evening as well. I also always take a second to say thank you to those who have made Witness to History possible and continue to promote Witness to History beyond our presentation this evening. So we're part of the Moreland Network, and I'd like to thank Lee and Kevin Kay and Colin Compton, of course, with the city, John Dutton, of course, because he is the person behind the Zoom controls. So all we have to do is give him a little hint and he takes over for us and keeps us all, online. Even if I disappear, everybody else will still be here. And that might happen sometimes. And I'd like to thank Megan Hayes with the library, Kamala Lewis with the city of Cleveland, because they will make sure Megan posts the Witness to History videos within the Shaker Library. So this is available forever. As we know, technology keeps us around. So coming on back to our guest this evening, George Eaton has been part of the network from the very beginning. And I would say that I have learned so much more about George just in the conversation we've had leading up to this evening. And I think that, and I know everybody's going to enjoy your story. So let's just start off, George. I hope you're well. Let's start from the very beginning. And we see this wonderful picture of George. We love baby pictures. So tell us a little bit about where you were born and a little bit about your early life.
Sure. Well, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was about 3 years old. This picture on the right was that first year I was here in Cleveland. And this was in the Glenville neighborhood off of 105th Street, a place called Lee Avenue, and in the corner of Lee Avenue and 109th Street. And then in the picture to the right is a friend of mine who we've been together for all these years, ever since nursery school. So his name is Melvin Pye, and we've been close. So basically, this was, as we talk about you asked me about my life. One thing I had to say is that my life has been one of reconciliation.
Yes.
Okay? And I'm still trying to reconcile so many things. During this time, one of the earliest memories I still hold on to was going down the street from this house and going to see friends of mine named Mark and Cindy. And they lived on the second floor. As I got up to the landing, an elderly man stopped me and looked over and said, "Are you white or are you colored?"
Okay.
And at that time, was just beginning to learn my colors, so I knew purple, red, orange, green, and I knew I wasn't any of those. So I figured I must be white, and it just something that always stayed with me about that, and coming up with just what my particular identity is or was. So, and later on, it's because, well, I went, going through high school and everything else. And each summer, I used to go down to Birmingham, and this went on probably till I was like 13, maybe even 14. And there were a lot of things that went on there that I couldn't quite understand. My grandmother tried to help me. I can remember asking her what was the difference between white people and black people, or colored people was the term at the time. Did they have different blood, or were white people didn't have blood, or what the way she would always say, child, of course they do. It's no different. Okay. So at any rate, we had I had relatives down there, cousins, and one person who I really thought was my cousin, it turned out that she was the daughter of my father's best friend. Okay. They had gone to high school together. They were both musicians, and they went to Tuskegee together, and they were both went into the Army Air Corps together. He called him Stumpy, we called him Uncle Stumpy, but it was in 1963 that as you see in the corner, this was Mr. Robertson's daughter, youngest daughter, Carol Robertson. And up until that point, I really had thought Carol was a cousin of mine. And when she was bombed in the 16th Avenue, she was one of the 4 girls that was bombed in the 16th Avenue Baptist Church. And that's when they kind of had to break it to me that we really weren't cousins, blood cousins. So that set very, it was very difficult for me to digest that whole process, and it just always stayed on my mind for a long time, especially the other things that had gone on in Birmingham that I was witness to. But anyway, life goes on, and I was going to Glenville High School, and we graduated in '66. And
1966, folks, that was a good year.
Absolutely.
All right.
And what happened was in '66, there was also the riots in Glenville.
Yes.
And it put me in a position of just, trying to grasp the idea of what race was and the differences, the inordinate discrepancies between, blacks and whites. But it's just something that you just file back in the back of your mind someplace, or at least I did. And anyway, so after this, after the riots, I was a little bit disgruntled about a lot of things, and disgruntled, I should say. And it was expected for me. My mother and father both thought I would be going to college, and I didn't want to go. My brother had gone right after his graduation, and many of the people that I had known had gone off to college. But I wanted to get a better idea of what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make some money so that I could get some. Well, mostly it was a car at that time, and also get an apartment that I could be away from my parents. But so, as it turned out, though, an odd thing happened, and that was that I was drafted. I was only there's only 2 other people that I knew. I wasn't even 19, but I was drafted. And
so probably a good number of people were drafted during that time.
Oh,
Vietnam War was going on.
Oh yeah, exactly. And another oddity to it, it was the Navy that drafted me. Most people are drafted by the Army.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that was unusual. But I remember one of my very good friends was when we were talking about, nobody wanted to go to Vietnam. I had already lost one friend to Vietnam. And so when I told my other good friend who I'd gone to elementary school with, even, and he said, okay, well, we'll have a send-off party. So we were going to supposedly have this send-off party at his house. I went by there, I stopped and picked up a 6-pack of Colt 45. Okay.
Colt 44, that brings back.
Yes. And So his father let me in, and then his father had to go someplace else, and he said my friend Kenneth would be back soon. As it turned out, they didn't come back. So I was there with that whole six pack of Code 45, and I drank just about the whole six pack. And as it turned out, the next day when I had to go to the recruitment station, uh, I have to they had I couldn't get it. They couldn't get a decent urine test from me. So that and a couple of other things that I kind of exaggerated about was enough for them to say that I was not to disqualify me.
Mm.
Okay. So that was always interesting. I know the day before I went down, my father told me that when he went into service, they had, especially when people were being drafted, they'd have two physicians and they tell you, bend over, spread your cheeks, and if they could see each other, then you flunked. Okay, so that wasn't quite wasn't quite what happened there, but I did figure that they might catch on to the fact that I was kind of faking a lot of the information I had given them, both with my eyes and with the urine samples and everything else. So I made a point to make sure I got enrolled in college at
Okay.
that time.
I'm
So
sure however
uh,
your parents were pleased,
yes,
and they were pleased.
so
So take
well,
us, and this is a lesson in how to get a permanent deferment from the military, I suppose, right? Okay. There were not
okay.
many people probably at that point that were able to get a physical deferment. But one thing that many people did was to go to college. During that time, I always tease about how I knew men in particular who probably had graduate degrees continued to go to school in order to make sure they did not go to the military. And eventually time moved on and they became professional folks. And then Nixon ended the war and, the draft was gone. So it worked. But okay, George, you had your own way of staying out of
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah. All
Okay.
you had to do is stay in school till you were 28.
Yeah,
And
right.
many
Yeah,
of them did that.
unusual.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
So I want to let everybody know too, you can certainly post comments or questions in the chat anytime, and we'll try to keep up with that. So, please feel free to do that during our conversation. So you went off to college, but let's go back a little bit further, quite a bit further. Tell us a little story about your great grandparents. And I want to tease you a little bit about the legacy of your family going to college after graduation from high school, and you had the nerve to tell your parents you weren't going to go. So, all right, tell us about your great grandparents.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my great grandfather, whose name was George Bell, and his name passed down to me, met my great grandmother at Berea College, which is just outside of Lexington, Kentucky. And my great grandfather had been born a slave, and you know was able to be and was freed later on, but he still had to work. He still had to work uh, the, the area, the farmland that
Mhm.
they had gotten from the plantation owner, Mr. Bell. Okay, so it took him 9 years to graduate,
Mm,
and once he did graduate, he and my grandmother married.
mm,
Okay,
mm,
and they had 4, 5 children, and of those, there were only two that had children too, and they were their grandchildren. So there were 5 grandchildren. My
mhm.
mother, her 2 sisters, and then my mother's cousin and her sister. They were the 5 of them. And so in 1980, I mean 2008, we all got together and went to the Founders Day celebration in honor of my grandmother and my great grandmother and great grandfather. Those that are in the front, you might see me in the back, and I have right next to me is right in front of me is my cousin Victor, who I probably would say something about later on. He and I were born like a month and a half apart,
Okay.
and so we were like the terrible twins. Okay, we'd always get into trouble. and his brother's right behind him, and my brother's right next to them. And you might see Pat in there.
Yes,
And
in there, right in
this,
the middle.
so the rest of them are my family, my first cousins, second cousins, and even third cousins who
Mm.
were who lived there in Berea. There's even a town that my grandfather had. When I talked about working the farm, he and my great grandfather,
Mm.
um, had the land, and they basically had bought up the land from the plantation owner.
Mhm.
And there's to this day a place just outside of Berea. It's called Belltown, which was
Oh,
which was what my family had developed. So anyway,
that's that is
that's with the great grandfather. Now I wound up going to a place called Knoxville College, which is in Knoxville, Tennessee. And as it turns out, there was a history of, of my ancestors meeting one another and marrying one another in college. My grandfather met my grandmother at Knoxville College.
okay.
And as it turns out, my grandmother, her sister, and her brother both went to Knoxville College.
Mm.
My mother, her two sisters went to Knoxville College. My uncle went to Knoxville College. There were roughly 10 of us
Oh,
all and that went to Knoxville College. So it was a pretty much of a shoe-in for all of us to go there.
no brainer. Where are you going to go to college? Okay,
Yeah,
so in the family,
exactly.
it's all in
Exactly.
the family, and just such a legacy. It's so when we think about the significance of education, and to have this story and legacy in your family that many people don't necessarily sit around and talk about, but it's very important. And then to think that you had the nerve to say you were not going to go to college after high school, but that is history because we know that you did,
Yeah.
and your journey in college was also interesting. We had, and I want to just say this, pretty quickly through Knoxville, we had something in common about when you went off to college, what you had determined you were going to major in.
Oh, yeah. Was Spanish, foreign language. And I had when I was in at Glenville, I had I had taken Spanish, and there was a family that lived next street over. They were Spanish speaking, and so a lot of times they'd help me out, with my homework, and so I became almost, as far as accent and articulation, fluid. Okay, and we wrote, a friend of mine wrote a play in high school in Spanish.
Mm,
Okay,
wow.
and it was really, it was really an experience for me. So I felt comfortable in taking Spanish when I went to Knoxville,
Mhm.
and I said, well, I'd like to minor in speech and drama, because even when I was in high school, I liked the idea of acting,
Mm.
uh, but it wasn't the most popular or masculine thing for guys to do at Glenville. Okay, so anyway, so when you're off to college, you reinvent yourself, and so that was the thing. I could do what I wanted. So
Absolutely. I mean, and I see we answered your question, Barbara. So you began your college career as a Spanish major. And if we fast forward a little bit, did you graduate from Knoxville College? Let me just ask you that question
no,
first.
I didn't.
Where
No, I
did
didn't.
you go after that?
Well, actually, after 2 years, I chose not to go back to school.
Mm.
And one of the things that was happening during this time was the Black Power movement, or
Mm.
Black nationalism.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of problems. Well, one of the things about Knoxville College is that it was a Presbyterian school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we had requirements of Religion 101, Religion 102. We had weekly chapel that we had to go through. And one of the things about it is that it was like an abstract world. You got to talk to everybody of things. You could even go in and talk to your professors if they didn't even have to be your professors. You could talk to any professor if you had something you wanted to discuss with them. And like I said, I had real issue with much of what was going on in the Black Power movement, although I, in some ways, felt the need to be militant.
Okay.
Okay. But I had a problem with the religion, okay? And I had always grown up with my grandmother on my father's side, was a very religious woman, and she would always talk about the second coming of Christ. And
Mhm.
so it stayed in my mind, if that ever happened, how would you recognize it? Who could recognize it, you know? And so usually with the Black Power movement, they were doing their best to discredit religion in every way. Even though some were switching over and becoming Muslim,
Yes.
they felt, again, this, like Malcolm X was saying, it was the opiate of the people, and they should not, uh, we should not hold on to religion because it's going to hold us back as people and keep us passive and everything else. And um, so it was a quandary for me, and especially going back to what had happened to me um, in my exposure. Number one, in Birmingham with Carol Robertson and with the riots. It just always brought me to a point where I couldn't really reconcile my beliefs
Mhm.
in God and what was happening. So after, like I said, after the second year, I didn't go back. As a matter of fact, I wound up going after the summer. I wound up going to visit my cousin Victor, that I was telling you about. He and I are like a month and a half apart, and he was living in a place called Kensington,
Okay.
which is just outside California, just outside of Richmond. And he was going to Berkeley. I mean, not Berkeley, but Contra Costa Community College, which was like a powerhouse for Black power at that time and Black nationalism.
All right.
And so by going there, I got to talk with a lot of people, and I got to discuss a lot about uh, the movement. And one of the things that happened is I became determined that I was going to go back to school. And I also had been smitten uh, by a young lady there who was still in school. And as it turned out, I did end up going back to Knoxville, and we wound up getting married.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But I was going to work again. It reminds me of after high school. I was going to work again to get a little money and go back to finish school. But I was determined I was going to finish school.
Mhm.
And what happened is I met a guy well, some friends of mine referred me to a guy at University of Tennessee, and
Okay.
he was the dean of architecture there.
Mhm.
And when I talked, and uh, I, I talked to him, and he gave me an interview. We
Mm.
talked. I told him of my interests. I hadn't even thought of going into architecture, but I knew that I did like to draw, and math was a pretty subject that I liked. And so anyway, he and I after getting an appointment with him, he and I talked. It was like almost a couple of hours.
Mhm.
And he had just been, I told him I was from Cleveland. He had just been up to Cleveland. He gave a presentation at Tri-C. And I, so anyway, as we talked, I told him how I had loved geometry and I loved circles, but why do all the rooms have to be square? And how efficient a circle is because it encompasses more square footage for perimeter than any other shape. And as it turned out, he had just written a book almost and sort
Oh.
of quoted these same things about how Native American felt that white people had taken their power away because they forced them to live in square buildings.
Mm.
Okay, so they loved the round. So anyway, I wound up going to he. I guess he must have been a little bit impressed because he arranged for me to get a fellowship in architecture. And so when I started, instead of going back to Knoxville College, I went to University of Tennessee,
Mhm.
which my mother was ecstatic about because she had always thought they hadn't let blacks in UT. Okay,
Mm.
it had been like 4 years earlier that the first black had gone to UT,
Wow.
and so
Okay.
she was impressed to have a child at UT. So we went along,
That's
and as it turned out, though, I was also I talked about having a job, and I also so I did get a job working with Tennessee Valley Authority,
Mhm.
and
There's a whole history about TVA.
yeah,
There is.
TVA.
So won't talk too much about that, but there is, if anybody wants to look into Tennessee Valley Authority. All right,
Right.
there we have it.
And
Black people.
it was interesting because right after the first year married, uh, we had a daughter.
Mhm.
And so I was working full time at TVA while also carrying a full load at University of Tennessee,
Oh,
roughly 21 hours, quarter hours at
all
that time. And that was well, the picture you see now is my daughter on the right,
right.
and
Now,
her
this is
three
your daughter who was born in Memphis?
yes.
Okay,
Well, actually, she was born in Knoxville,
okay.
Baptist Hospital there.
This is Gia.
And
This is Gia?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
all
We
right.
named her Gia because of my Spanish influence.
Mm.
The Miss Black America of 1969 was a woman named Gladys Olivia Smith, and we called her Gio. And so I sort of feminized that, and it would be Gia, and that became her name, and that was her name.
Nice.
Before even knowing about Gia Scalapay or any of the actors or Italian people, but at any rate, so
You held on to some of the Spanish influence,
yeah,
huh?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. So
And the picture on the left.
that is that this the right is my Memphis grandchildren. The left are my Cleveland grandchildren.
Okay.
Okay, my son there by my son whose picture is not in shown, but this it's Pat, mine and Pat's son,
Mm-hmm.
and they're his children.
Yeah.
So
I've
it
seen granddaughter at
yeah
church.
yeah.
I have. I've seen her helping out.
Oh yeah, she worked with the one of the plays that we did at Moreland, and she was
Oh,
behind
okay.
the scenes.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Oh, okay.
that's Angel on the far left. So anyway,
Nice, nice.
so
So that was your,
the
so what happened? You were telling me about something that set you back a little bit.
set me back quite a bit. After 2 years, I I realized I had an eye problem, and I had it for some time. When I my senior year in high school is when I started wearing glasses, and just about every year after that, I had to renew my prescription.
Mhm.
And because I was coming back and forth from Cleveland to Knoxville, the uh, ophthalmologist typically blamed the person down in Knoxville, or Knoxville blamed the person in Cleveland. But it wasn't until I was in college that at UT that I realized I had an eye condition called keratoconus,
Mm.
and it causes the basically the tissue in the center of the eye to weaken, and the eye goes into a conical shape, creating a great astigmatism.
Mm.
So as it turned out, my vision couldn't be corrected better than 2040. And that basically, to understand 2040 is like what average person can see at 40 feet, I see at 20 feet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I basically had to drop out of school. I just I couldn't handle the, the eye work, just the intensity of it.
Mm.
And so I subsequently left Tennessee Valley Authority also because I was working on I was a draftsman on the board there. So I went to Memphis, where I got a job as an insurance agent, mind
Mm.
you. Okay. My wife's family had been in the insurance business, so there were certain references I was able to get from them. Uh, but my eyes continued to get bad, and I got to the point where I was considered legally blind.
Okay.
Okay,
Mhm.
and that means that your vision cannot be corrected with glasses beyond 2200. Again, that means what most people can see at 200 feet, I see at 20 feet.
Okay.
So so at any rate, I wound up working with the American Society for the Blind,
Mhm.
and they helped me get a career rather than as blind people, you always think about them making brooms, things like that. But this time, they um, we they paid for me to go to a broadcasting school.
Oh,
That was to get my you get first, second, and third class third classes with an endorsement on completing. So I enrolled in that school and completed it. And they also helped me with contact lenses.
Mm.
Get it, found me a doctor, and that was what it was determined that's the way of curing the disease that I had.
Mm.
And Memphis was doing a lot more work in contact lenses than Knoxville.
That's
So
around the time,
yeah,
early 70s. Is that what it was, early
yes, yeah,
1970s?
exactly,
Contact
exactly.
lenses hadn't really, I mean, that's when we start seeing people say, okay, I'm throwing these glasses away, I'm wearing contacts.
Right,
That's
right,
the time
right. But
I
because of
heard about
yeah,
contacts.
and
So,
but because of my eye condition, it was very hard. I was very difficult. It was very difficult to fit me. And I
mm,
never got, so I couldn't get fitted in Knoxville for it, but I
mm,
did get fitted in Memphis. And so when my eyes were basically came back together, I was able to get a job,
mhm,
and I got a job. I couldn't get one in architecture, believe it or not.
mm,
There was a lot of well, make it simple, discrimination.
mm,
Okay,
mhm,
I can remember going in one time to I had talked over the phone to an employer, an architect, and told him what my history had been, the school, and I'd worked for TVA. He said, "Okay, come on in." And as soon as I got there, they sang another tune.
mm.
Okay, he wouldn't even come out to see me. He sent someone else to see me, and someone else told me, "Well, we don't have any openings right now."
Alrighty.
So anyway,
Yeah.
but I was able to get some work with an engineering firm, and
Mhm,
I was doing. There was a doing both. It was a civil engineering firm and a surveying firm. So I was able. I did a little surveying, and I did start working with in engineering as doing plumbing and heating. Okay,
okay.
so that was good. And then I lucked out again and found these two guys, and I kind of had to go back because at that time there were only three Black architects in the whole state of Tennessee.
Mm,
Okay, and one of them I had known when I was in Knoxville, Reverend Dykes, and he had referred me to this guy in Memphis, and so I went to see him. His name was Claire Jones, and when I went in, I knew that I needed to have more experience, and I told Mr. Jones, I said, I will be willing to work for nothing, for
mm,
free. And he looked at me and said, "Well, how much experience do you have, though?" So
mhm,
at any rate, I guess he took pity on me, and he and the gentleman named Harold Thompson just opened their firm,
mm,
and they would spend all kinds of hours working till burning the midnight oil for it. And so I was able to work in the evenings. So I worked at the engineering firm during the day, and then I go to the architectural firm in the evening. And he did decide to pay me. It was $100 a month, but it was something.
yeah. So
But
that's what you call an internship.
oh yeah, absolutely,
Alright.
absolutely,
You were an apprentice,
absolutely.
but I mean,
So
it paid off. It
I
paid off.
think it did. I
Okay,
think it did.
we're going.
So it so I went and was working, like I said, nights there and days at the but in the meantime, my marriage just kind of fell apart. And it had been falling apart before
Because you were
because
working 24 hours during the day, you had one job, another in the evening. So yes.
well, it kind of was even before that because of my not having any job. Okay, when I was blind and I was going to school and
Yes.
whatnot.
You all were young.
So yeah, and we were still young. So
And these pictures, your marriage didn't last, your first marriage.
right,
And
right,
so you're back in Cleveland.
yes,
You come back
came
to
back to
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Right.
So introduce us to Pat.
Okay, this is Pat. You can see us cutting the cake here.
Yeah.
Patricia and I. It's you talk about going back to Glenville. We knew each other. Actually, we're in the same homeroom since we were 12 years old,
Mhm.
seventh grade,
Mhm.
and So anyway, we never had any kind of relationship though, throughout school. And but when I came back, my friend had, and he's down in the corner left hand, I mean right corner left end of the picture, Kenneth Marshall, and he was saying, "You ought to go. Well, you ought to meet somebody," and it was Pat.
Mm.
And so Pat and I just kind of talked to each other, and she helped me in a whole lot of things that I was doing, work that I was doing.
Or get reacquainted after you knew each
Yeah,
other since junior high.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and I guess one of the things though, as far as when I talked about reconciliation, um, part of what was going on in my life again was about um, uh, trying to do something with architecture, not
Mhm.
just as not as a profession. I didn't plan to do, to be a really wealthy guy. And there were very few black architects that I knew. As I mentioned, there was a
Well, let
guy
me,
out.
I know you learned a lot about, I want to get to some of your drawings.
Oh, okay,
It,
okay,
I want to because, and if you can, lead us through some of the people you've worked with, of course,
okay.
Cleveland in particular, but you're an architect, which was, and
Yeah.
I think when I first, I was like, really, George, let me talk to him. We need to hear this story. And so you came back to Cleveland, and these are some of your drawings. I thought that would be of interest to everyone.
Well, the drawing that you're looking at now was done in Memphis. That was the engineering firm that I was working with.
Okay, okay, go back.
And it was just one of the proposals that we had done, but there were several other drawings that I had done for, and like I said, sometimes when you're doing survey, you have to come back and you have to put delineate the contours that you
Mm.
shot, took elevations on while you're out in the field. So this was a combination of doing both surveying and engineering work there. There's another picture here. I think, yeah, this was Claire Jones.
I ask you this at this point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, George.
Sure.
The technology, is this all on the computer? Is this
No, oh,
hand
say
drawn?
what?
That's why I wanted to ask you the question, because I can imagine what year this is
I,
and talk about how these drawings came about. All right.
oh, oddly enough, when I was at where I was showing you the engineering picture drawing, um, they introduced probably one of the first working computers for surveyors, and it
Mm.
was Wayne. Okay, and it took the guy that one of the chief men that was working it. He would take the book home, read it, and come back and play. It took him 2 weeks just to understand how to use it. And he had gotten so tied up into that machine that when it went down because of a power failure, he basically passed out.
Mm.
Okay, that tied. But at this time there were no computers. There weren't even hand calculators. We had when I was in school, we were doing what they called a slide rule, and I was still using that to do computations.
Oh, slide rule. I remember
Oh
slide.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. And so as we went to the the picture with the Jones, the architectural picture
Mhm.
that we were looking at, yeah,
Yes.
this was a funeral home. There were several projects that we did. This is what you call a presentation drawing, which I basically got to the point where I was doing most of the presentational drawings, along with as needed some of the actual construction drawing drafting. So this was done for Ford Funeral Home, and I may have mentioned to you, Mr. Ford was a funeral director, and he had a son named Harold Ford, who became the congressman there in Tennessee. But while I was working with this firm, I had the occasion of being in a play with Isaac Hayes. And when I met him, we were able to talk casually, and I mentioned to him about working for an architectural firm, but had he ever thought about having someone design a house
Mm.
for him? As it turned out, he fell in love with the movie Godfather,
Yeah.
and there was that picture where the horse's head was in the bed,
Oh, yes. Yes. It's very.
and the house, that mansion that he had, where the guy lived, had a horse in it. He loved the architect. That's
Mm.
who he wanted to do his work
Oh,
because he was.
okay. Mm.
So that was sort of a frustration to me about, again, Blacks being able to, what was architecture really about? Uh, as I reflected back on it, I saw the need in being, um, you know, what had happened to Glenville, and perhaps even the need to rebuild a city within a city. And I
Yes.
looked to try
Mhm.
and bring, my talents to the inner city neighborhoods,
Mhm.
even if it's just houses. Many of the students were talking about high rises and everything else, but I
Mhm.
was very focused on doing what I considered the more practical aspects of building architecturally within the inner city. However, people in the inner city don't have much money, so that becomes another issue that later on I got to, and into the process of design build. Okay, so
Now,
uh,
is also in Memphis? This is
uh,
the Justice Center
no, this was in Cleveland.
in
Um,
Wayne County.
yes, I was working for a company, Robert P. Madison.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
and his brother had Madison International.
Yes, should be a familiar name to many of us. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
and when I came to work with him, I came to work as in the architectural department, but they needed more work in the engineering department.
Hmm.
So because I had experience with engineering in Memphis, I started working with him doing HVAC design work.
Mm-hmm.
So that lasted for like 2 years. I was with Madison, and then they had a cutback because there was a big project they had hoped to get, didn't get it, so they had to cut back. But it was fun. One of the great things was this job here, in the work that we did in Worcester. We did 3 buildings there: the Justice Center, there was an administration center, and oh, I can't remember the third one. But there, uh, and community center.
Okay.
So we did 3 buildings there, and they liked, obviously they liked Mr. Madison, and so they were willing to go a little bit beyond normal and say, well, at this time, solar energy was not really very popular, but they were willing to risk and extend themselves to try and do solar energy. So this was why that proposal came up. So,
Around what
but
year was that? Real quick, let me jog your
this
memory.
is this is 1976 at this point.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Very
So
good. All
so
right.
anyway,
More drawings. Tell us more about some of the work that you've done.
oh, okay. This is the uh, in talking about working in the inner city. I had uh, through a couple of other jobs that I had, and I went down to Columbus, mind you, and I had I was down there, and I was a disc jockey
Mm-hmm.
while I was there, and used the licenses that I had gotten out of Memphis to get a job there. But during the day, I was working at an architectural firm doing hospital design.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, things happened, and I was doing uh, disc jockey at night. But at any rate, I came back to Cleveland, and one of the things that happened was I came with a sense again of trying to build something in inner city.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Out of all the jobs I had, I later got a job with Kent State University, where I worked for 5 years as associate university architect.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was doing that, I got well, I did several things as far as community work. Again, my heart is for doing things, improving inner city.
Sure.
And this project that we're looking at now is when I got involved with Habitat for Humanity. They had asked several architects to submit designs, so it was like a design competition for a 4-bedroom house, and they selected my design. Okay, so this is the design here, and I was working with a church group that was the Fairmont Presbyterian, which was a
Okay.
predominantly white church,
Yes.
and Mount Zion Congregationalist Church, which is the church I grew up in very young. And they had a what's it called, a joint vision covenant.
Nice.
As you can see, this shirt, I designed the logo for that shirt, and everybody liked it. And this is us doing the groundbreaking for the house that you saw earlier, the drawings that you saw earlier. And so, matter of fact, to me, with that shirt on, right there, just to the right of the sign, it was there on Luther Avenue.
And Luther exactly is where? Give us a proximity
55th.
Here.
Yeah, it runs into 55th. It's a one-way street into 55th, and it's
55th
just
and 55th and what?
Okay, it's just north of Wade Park and just south of Superior. Okay. So, and what happened with this is that there were Habitat had other churches, other church groups that were doing housing there. And so we had like 7 units that were going at the same time. This was, the one we were doing was the largest because it was a 4-bedroom. And it was amazing to see what happened to the city. This is the house as it stands today.
Wow.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Finished product. And when we did this, and there were other people doing, it was amazing to see how the neighborhood changed. People that had cars in the driveways and all, they got rid of them. People started painting their houses, fixing up their porches. The whole neighborhood came together, and to me, that was such a dynamic experience, to the point that when I left Kent State, I was bound and determined, rather than to be caught up with architecture and building new all the time, it was about being able to revitalize. If we did do new, we could couple it with renovations and rehabs within the inner city. I was very committed to doing that. And
your labor, your design, your ideas, your creativity, it did exactly what you wanted it to do. Right there, we still need you to do these things. We know you still do. So what are these drawings? I know that you have an addition that you're going to share with us.
Yes, this is in addition to a house in Euclid. And they wanted to, well, the design criteria was to try and get as many things as they could. They wanted to expand their kitchen. They wanted a bathroom. They wanted a bedroom, and so, so anyway, I was able to do all this, and we started. It was a nice little project that went on, and I finished up. I didn't make any money on the job, but it was still good, and the homeowners were quite satisfied and pleased with it.
I had to chime in this note from Judith Cunningham. Says, we definitely need you to take a look at our place. Okay. All righty.
So this is the house. We have the excavation starting. You see me there on the right, next to the little backhoe, just across from the backhoe. The guy running the backhoe is somebody I had gone through Glenville with, spent most of my years with. We went to prom together. We had dates. We double dated at prom. And so anyway, he dug the foundation for it, and then we started. Some of this is the framing, the early framing of the project, and then you see more of the framing, the roof framing, and then you see once we got it covered, and we put the Tyvek and the vinyl siding on it. along with the deck out from the double doors. Okay.
Mhm.
Homeowner was really, they were really pleased with the project.
I can imagine why. Look at this.
Yeah, they had, you know, we, after we did the rough framing, then we did put the drywall up, and then painted. And the homeowner was good enough to they were able to get take little vacations while we were doing this project, because I can tell you, and I told them from the very beginning, it can be a real discomfort
Yes.
to have renovation going on in your house.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable. And I even had a client who they basically broke up. The marriage, the marriage broke up before the project was finished, but they kept they argued about how things were going. It was so uncomfortable for them and everything. So you have to be ready for an addition to your house, and that's what I was trying to tell them. So anyway, the other thing is that beyond just the design build, I had to learn how to uh, do carpentry work, because I found a lot of times I would try and explain things to carpenters, and it's like you know, they draw a blank. Well, I've never seen that before. I've never done it that way, or this. So I wound up having to do it myself. And this was one of the things to the sauna tub here, is doing extension, building extension on, and you can see the different phases where it first set. Then I did the framing around it, and then we did the tile work around that. So,
How long
like I
did
said,
how long did it take from start to finish?
2 months, 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah. It
So
could have been.
so
I'm
another
sorry.
message from Sam Hooper and Mrs. Hooper. We need you to look at ours too. Okay, just needed to let you know.
Okay.
Got a few folks who want to talk to you after this.
All right.
Go
Okay.
look at this window seat. Look at the floors. Oh, this is just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Two
And
months.
yeah, they love, and like I said, this is in Euclid, and they're high up on the hill that looks down on Euclid Boulevard, and the view from this window seat was stunning. Okay, really. That, and there was a double door patio door
Mm,
that was over on the kitchen side.
wow.
Uh,
This,
was
these are
also
the
looked out.
stunning. Your work is stunning. This is your talents are
Yeah,
boundless.
yeah. And this is the finished product of the kitchen. And this is the double door I was talking about. And I'm working with this guy who became a friend of mine, and almost to the point I used to call us twins, because our thought patterns were so much alike.
Wow.
And except I would say mother never let him out of the house during sunny days. So he was, so anyway, Tim McDonough
Get to have
is the
somebody
guy.
like that, to have a partner like that.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And the thing is, Tim did not mind working in inner city. And so we were doing things inner city. I was working with a place called after Habitat. I went to the Cleveland Housing Network,
Mhm.
where they focused on renovating houses.
Mhm.
And from Cleveland Housing Network, I went to a place called one of their subsidiaries was more or less, I, I hate to say subsidiary, it was a CDC that came under the umbrella of Cleveland Housing Network. And
Mhm.
that was Mount Pleasant Now,
Yeah.
which is there along Kinsman.
Yes.
And Tim helped me a couple of times on some projects that we're doing, and had no problem working with these young inner city people. And you know, they were just trying to learn, and he didn't mind helping them. So it was we developed a great relationship. The two.
Okay. Well,
And so,
so for anybody who is with us today that did not know all of this about George, just a little glimpse of your talents and your creativity. And I just, I just love it. I just love
okay.
it.
Well,
We
thank you. Thank
conversation.
you.
So let's go back to reconciliation. Talk a little
Yes.
bit about your, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's 7 o'clock already. So I want to make sure
Oh
that
my
we are
goodness.
mindful of our time. And so some of it, when you left Knoxville College, you talked about religion a little bit.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
let's go
And
back to that.
well, and it was a whole thing about religion and trying to tie it into the Black Power movement and Black nationalism. And Malcolm X basically was trying to say, we can't do this. He gave a speech on ballot or the bullet. And he talked about the important thing was for Blacks to work together and put religion aside because they were they had too many disagreements. But while I was in Memphis, well, when I mentioned about in school and studying religions, out of all the religions I studied, I just happened to stumble across a person who told me about this faith called the Baha'i faith. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I went to Memphis, which was almost 3-4 years later, that I actually ran across Baha'is. It was at the time when, as I said, my marriage had fallen apart, and I was on my way to work, and I had passed this place several times, and I saw this building that said Baha'i meetings on Sunday. So I went, I listened, and it gave me it gave me a way of kind of making things make sense. Because number one, they said the Baha'is were talking about religion. All the religions agree that it is a progressive process for revelation. That all the prophets that come with the new addition to what the former prophets had said. And so I love the idea. And it said that that racism was America's most vital and challenging issue. Now, this is the Baha'i faith came from Iran, was found by a man named Baha'u'llah. And for them to be talking, which means glory of God, and for them to be talking about racism, it just floored me. So I became a Baha'i, and it allowed me to have a religious connotation to my whole thinking about architecture, about urban existence, and the significance, the very strong significance of community. And so it was. So even though and this, as you see this picture here,
this is familiar to many people if you've walked through the Hildana Park.
Hildana Park, yes. And this is a 9-pointed star, which is a symbol that you'll see in the Baha'i faith very often. It's almost like the 6-pointed Star of Israel, of Star of David. And like I said, Baha'i faith is inclusive of all the other major faiths. And this gave me a sense of the need for unity and harmony. And as I looked at the whole Black Power, Black nationalist movement, it was all a matter of people working together, coming together. I felt that one of the things that could happen is if I were able to get, say, 50 Black men together, I could change the city. So I really felt that way, and I was involved with a company named a group called the JCs, which is Junior Chamber of Commerce. Love that organization, and one of the premier tenets of it is that about belief in God, giving meaning and purpose to human endeavor. And one of the other ones was that brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nations, and that economic justice can best be won by free men through free enterprise, and government should be of law rather than of men. And so this is one of the meetings and presentations that we had. I'm not sure if that's Mike Whyte that's there, but he was very supportive of what we as JCs did. Many people only see JCs as doing the haunted house thing that went on, but we did a lot of things. We sponsored a junior achievement group. We did this button you see on the right. It was called Clean Sweep Project, where we would go from 88th to 150th on St. Clair and do just a cleanup. And many of the city, the organizations, the businesses along St. Clair would pitch in and help out in many cases. So it was a great thing. that we did. And we sponsored a little league team, as well as built ramps for people that were handicapped. We called it Operation First Step. And while I was doing that, I worked with the director of community development at Cleveland, who at that time was a woman named Ruth Miller.
Yeah.
And she was, and she felt I was helpful to her, and she helped me a lot. And we put sort of pressure on the Cleveland Regional Transit, and they began to buy buses for handicapped people. With the lift gate.
Yes.
Okay, that because we had SJCs, we had statistics on how many people were handicapped and couldn't get out of the house. We were doing a lot of money to do the curb cuts, but they weren't being used because people couldn't get out of their houses. So that was why we did it. So that was
your influence, your impact, and people may not know, but we do. Those of us who have listened, that everybody may not know your name, but we can relate to so many things that you've done. Your reach has been broad and deep.
Yeah.
And your love for Cleveland and people. And I have to tell people too that I do believe the first time that I met you, George, was through my good friends, Dick and Melody Yates.
Okay. Yes.
We're behind.
Yes.
A couple of decades ago, probably.
Right. Absolutely.
So when I learned that you were an architect, I was like, really? I mean, which I learned more recently from Kevin. This is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. And here's another comment from Judith. You've been a gift to so many that don't even know that you have helped them.
Okay.
Yes. We're going to spread the word.
Okay.
We're going to spread the word.
You folks are really too kind. Really.
Oh my goodness. But you have the heart for it, and you have the talent, and you have always known. I mean, what I hear, your reconciliation, but you also knew that you wanted some things to happen, that you brought your talents to the table to make it happen. Some people say they're going to do it, but some people really make it happen. And we've been able to see that. That's wonderful. You're in our neighborhood. You're in our community.
Well, the thing is, again, it's about unity. As I've talked about the whole Black nationalist issue, one of the things that I see now happening is the Black community not being united. Even to this day, we still have. I mean, when I went down to a radio program in Columbus, one of the things I wanted to do with my program was to talk, because radio was the credible media at the time.
Sure. Oh my goodness.
And so when I went there, I wanted to talk, and communication is so important. And I wanted to talk about people learning to come together. The name of my program was A Touch of Love, and that what love could do for Black people. And we talk about the disparities with Blacks, but somehow we forget that one of the things that happened during the process of slavery was the manipulation of Blacks against Blacks. And that's one way you keep people down, is you have them arguing among themselves. They don't pay attention to who the real oppressor is. And we have so many emotional garbage left from that. And so there's a lot of backbiting, jealousy, even now we still have problems talking about skin color and whose hair is good hair and things like that. And these are the things that have really kept us from, I think, uniting. But I've also seen that just as Blacks needed to unite, becoming Baha'i, it made me see that whites do too. They're subject to some of the same thing too. We just happen to be on a lower level of them. But it is about coming together and being united. And that's
a smaller number, not a lower level. Small.
Yeah, that's exactly. So so part of that, when we look at that garden, though, one of the things about that garden is my strong belief in how united we should be. And one of the line in there, the quote in that garden, if you ever go by it, it says, "Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch."
Mm.
Okay, and that speaks to I think, the inextricable unity of all mankind, whether we acknowledge it or not. We're all connected. We're all tied into each other,
Of course.
and
Of course.
if we learn to work with each other, we can amass some wonderful things.
Oh, yes, we're working on. John, could you go back to the other so I can see all the chats? I want to make sure that you hear this, George, because I don't think you're reading the chats. I'll read these out loud. Again, from Judith Cunningham. How long did you work to get the garden put in shaker? How long did that take you?
We started in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of red tape to go through with doing that in Shaker. And so I say 2018, it was really the early part of 2018. And then we planted 2 trees. It was November of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2019, I was able to do the framework for the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And last year in 2020, we weren't able to do anything because of the pandemic. But in 2021 is when we actually planted the plants.
Oh, nice.
There.
Okay. Okay,
It's been a
nice.
3-year process at least.
And you
I
said
guess
because I said, well, I didn't see the flowers there the last time I walked through a couple of weeks ago. You said that that's nice. That's beautiful.
Right.
That's beautiful. I'll take a walk when it's not a rainy day. I want to make sure that I read these chats. Okay. And I think this is in response to Judith Cunningham's comment about you being a gift. Nevin Jenkins says, ditto with that. George is a gift. George is always of service and helping others. I'm grateful that my kids get to call him Uncle George. That's from Nevin Jenkins. And then
folks are almost embarrassing me now.
Rosie Jenkins says, thank you, Uncle George. You've been such a wonderful example to the kids and youth in the community. Your experience is valuable for this generation. And from Mel, Gwen, and Tina, you are an awesome person. Thank you for sharing, Mel, Gwen, and Tina.
Oh, wow.
And
Thank
here
you.
we have from Sheila Gardner. Did you know Stephen Doggett? Am I pronouncing?
Yes.
Oh, Stephen
Yes,
Doggett.
he worked with the city of Cleveland, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Vicki Victoria, you've led a fascinating life. Thanks so much for sharing your story. And from Vanetta Jameson, thank you for sharing your story and for all that you have done. And from Chick, have to drop. Thanks, George, for your background and learning. You are an architect. And then she thanks me. Thank you, Donna. That's wonderful. Anybody else have questions, comments? You can chime in. You can unmute and chime in. And Barbara Baumgartner said she'll email you.
Okay.
Oh, but just my little commercial here, real quick. And then, if anybody else wants to chime in, if anyone is interested in being a guest on Witness to History and you're a Moreland resident or, a little bit more broadly, please contact me. Don't hesitate. There's my telephone number, 216-509-4018. Actually, if you do send me a text, just let me know who you are because, I'm like everybody else. If I don't recognize the telephone number, I might not answer the phone. You can always email me as well, Donna Whyte 1, and just keep in mind that it's spelled with a Y at Gmail. So I'd like to thank you, George, but does anybody else have anything they want to chime in? Do I have a couple more messages here?
George.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know Tom and Diane Foley, and are you in touch with any of their kids?
Yeah, I've not been able to reach their children. There's a woman in the Moreland neighborhood named Lavera, and she has been in touch with some of them, but has not let me know exactly if it's recently how to get in touch with them. But yes, I know.
Yeah, great. We'd love to talk to them if you ever can connect.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, well, I mean, Diane died, as you
Yes.
probably know, but
Yeah.
Tom, I can't find him. I heard he lost a lot of weight, and but I don't know. I think he's living in South Euclid at this point. My
Oh,
phone
okay.
numbers aren't working.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
I
Okay.
just want to read this message again from Sheila Gardner. She says, thanks for sharing. A great story. I'm glad you stuck with your dream. We're all glad. Sure, a lot of people are glad that you stuck with your dream.
Well, you know, Donna, I certainly appreciate this. I was very reluctant to do this because I felt I didn't have anything accomplished. And
Sure.
as I look back at my life, it just seems a lot. There were just so many different things that I did. And it almost seems like, oh, this guy can't make up his mind what he wants to do. But there was a lot of determination that has gone on. But I didn't think it was worth really sharing. And I'm really pleased that some of the people that have seen this feel that it was worthwhile, and that I may have given them some insight to living together culturally and what architecture means to in my what it means to the world, actually.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. Is Pat anywhere close by?
Yes, she is. She was
Yes.
there for a moment.
Oh, okay. I'll just ask her to, poke her head in and we'll say hi to her.
Okay.
Pass by. But that's what everybody says. I don't know if I really have a story to tell. Everybody has a story. If you asked a 5-year-old to tell a story, they tell you a story about their long life. So we know we have stories. We know we have stories, and they're all so rich, and we all have stories that are worth telling. Hi there, Pat.
Hi there, Donna. How are you?
Fine. And many of your friends are here as well. Many of George's friends.
These are the people that are here. Is he waving at you?
Hi, Kevin. Where's Lee?
I don't know. There's Al Foster.
Oh, hi, Uncle
Hi,
Al.
Hi, Auntie Pat.
You hear what he calls me? Auntie Pat.
That's
My
right.
two grandsons.
We
Oh,
have
and Barbara Baumgardner says she's sorry I have to leave. I'm late for another meeting. I'll talk with you.
Hey, Barbara.
Yeah,
Great seeing you. Yeah.
it's just absolutely wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful. We've
So-
learned so much. Yes.
Al Foster, yeah, where families are connected. His grandchildren are my great
Nephews.
great nephews. Yeah,
nephews.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
It's-
There's only like 2 degrees of separation among folks that have been touched by the sun.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You know where I got that from.
Yeah.
That's how Pastor Tuss says it. So I've been using that one. It sounds nice.
And Lee says, I'm here, but not on video. Hi, Pat.
Hi,
Pat.
Lee.
Says hi. And then Sarah says, anytime you make a difference, that is an accomplishment. That is for sure. Thanks so much, George, from James Walker.
Okay. I have to say one thing real quick. I just noticed that my aunt, my dear aunt and cousin who are in California have signed on.
Say hi.
Oh,
That's-
oh my goodness.
That's my Lydia.
He's this, look straight ahead.
Yeah. Nah,
He finally made it.
yes. Okay. Oh, gee. That's so good seeing you.
Why are you looking that way? Look this way.
So good seeing you.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice. Bring the world closer together.
Now, I just want to share with you. She's one of the granddaughters of my great grandfather, was in the picture there. And anybody that's gone to John F.
That's
Kennedy from 1965 to 1985 know her.
Oh.
All you have to do is say Miss Macbeth, and everybody knows. Oh yeah, they really loved her.
I'm gonna have to share that with some of my Kennedy friends.
Oh yeah, yeah,
know
indeed.
People of
You'd be
gratitude.
surprised. Yes, yes.
And Seal has a note here. I've enjoyed witnessing your talented life.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Now I wanted to remind everybody that that this recording will be posted on the Shaker Public Library site you know, you can find it in the history section of the library in a, you know, few weeks or months or whatever. So all of this is recorded, and the YouTube is also posted most of the time, I think, on our Moreland Rising newsletter, which is online. So if there are people who are not able, or if you know of someone who is not able to join us this evening, they will still be able to see this wonderful story that we have all been able to share, have George share with us this evening. And I don't think your work is done. I'm convinced that you're
Wow.
touching many people, and you just have, you know, a heart to share your gifts, and to, whether people know it or not, And we, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. Anybody want to share anything else before we part ways this evening?
I do. I just wanted to share that what George may not see is the results of the influence that he has made on other people. You know, through his inspiration, other people act, and they act for the betterment of their communities as well. And while I haven't made a lot of progress right now, just yet, it's through George's inspiration that I joined the Lake County NAACP and have been honored to be asked to be on their board. And we are just starting a program to try to improve the accuracy of American history in the Lake County schools. So if it had not been for George, I would never have thought to do anything like that. So thank you, George.
I want to chime in and say thank you, George, because I am a product of the Lake County schools. And so that's amazing that somebody's working with the NAACP to make some changes and correct history. So what a small world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Really.
Thank you.
Embarrassing almost.
Oh, thank you, George.
Thank you.
This is just wonderful. This is our neighbor. We know so much more about you, and we're here to thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this evening. So stay tuned. Everybody's welcome to come back with us next month. And our guest next month will be Mrs. Alice Brooks in August. And so second Sunday, same address. So you can always chime in, you know, to the same address for Witness to History. And again, I want to thank you, George, and everyone with us this evening. Thank you, John.
Yes. Oh, yeah. John has to have.
Yeah,
Thanks
John,
to John.
Controls. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week.